I'm live. It is Friday. It's the 20th of October. I've just noticed I haven't changed the calendar. That's how I get it wrong sometimes. I'm reading out of Eyes of Horus. It is the story of one of Joan Grant's life as Ra, the heir to the Nomarch of the Oryx. It plays 3,500 years BC. I've read all chapters. We are now in part 6 of this book, and the title of this chapter is The Field of HATHOR. There has been a battle. The battle was won. As the night paled with the coming of the dawn, I spoke to my men, assembled on the field of HATHOR. Men of the south, I speak to you in the name of Pharaoh. This day may be remembered in the history of Egypt, not only as that which marked a great battle, or as the day when Pharaoh was no longer challenged in his rightful powers, but as the day when fear went into exile, and the watchers of the horizon brought peace to the two lands. Each one of you is the symbol of 1,000 men. If you triumph, they will be free. If you fail, they may be enslaved. Fight not for glory, though your name will be imperishable as pyramids. Fight that your fellow men shall not be betrayed. Fight until defeat or victory is ours. Call on the name of Ra to give you strength. Ask Horus to bless your weapons, that they may be thirsty for the blood of Menhet and his followers. The dawn is come. Peace be upon you, and through you on the two lands. Long shadows were stealing across the field as I took my place 2 paces in front of the first rank. On my right, the battle wasn't won yet. This is the battle which was challenged by Menhet to fight who will become Pharaoh. This is the beginning of this battle. Long shadows were stealing across the field as I took my place 2 paces in front of the first rank. On my right, at the head of the men of the jackal, stood Hanuk. On my left was the hare. On the other side of the field, the enemy were assembled, their breech clouds vermilion, the royal colour, their leaders wearing no insignia of rank to distinguish them. Hanuk had been right. Menhet was too wise a soldier to wear the headdress of a warrior pharaoh, as he would have done had this been an ordinary battle. The heralds raised their trumpets. Both lines of men crouched for the dash forward. Everything was very quiet. Then the fabric of the morning was torn by the blare of the trumpets. Like hounds slipped from leash, we leapt forward, fast, but not too fast, for we must not be breathless at the first encounter. My shouted command was echoed down the ranks. The men who held unspoken line with me flung themselves down to let the javelins speed over our heads like a flight of wild fowl. Up and forward. The shield was already on my left arm, the dagger naked in my hand, another safe in its sheath hanging from my belt. With a crash, the waves of men broke against each other. Arrows were no longer falling. The man opposite me threw down his mace and drew his dagger. Almost before I realized my hand had struck at him, his eyes opened with inarticulate surprise. I jerked out the dagger, buried half to the hilt under the ankle of his jawbone. He was dead before he hit the ground. I was glad he was beyond further pain, for I heard his ribs crack as men surged over him. The man I was fighting was the only thing of which I was conscious. I might have been alone with him on an empty plain instead of being surrounded by a press of men. I was on the ground and he was trying to strangle me. He had kicked my dagger out of my hand, and somehow I must have made him drop his own. I locked my legs around his thigh and tried to pull him down. Part of my mind had a curious detachment. I noticed that the man who was killing me was a little older than myself. The lobe of his left ear was missing, and his eyes were a light grey, clear grey. There was a roaring louder than floodwater in my ears. I tried to shout, but my tongue had swollen too big for me to move it. I plucked at his hands. Nothing could ever be strong enough to pull them from my throat. Suddenly, there was a curious red flower on his forehead. I could breathe, though I was in agony, to draw each breath. He put his hand up to his head. The red flower has white stamens. No, I can see better now. They are slivers of bone and pulped flesh. I was still gripping his body with my legs. I rolled aside and he fell backwards. The mace bearer who had killed him for me grinned and looked for another on whom to test his skill. The main focus of the battle had swept past me, and I was able to regain my breath and look around. I saw Pata'aru and the other healer priest going calmly about the field, kneeling beside fallen men to see if they were dead or only wounded. I remember thinking that if only men had had priests who followed him to battle, ours would not have had so many to look after. He was quite dead, the grey eyes already losing their luster like the scales of a dead fish. I saw that my policy of keeping some of the bowmen back had been justified. An enemy who broke through our ranks was allowed to run on unhindered until he proved an easy target. One of them was still running, trying to pluck an arrow out of his side. A priest hurried over to him and led him away. The battle had not long been joined, but already there must have been 200 dead. I thought, I must find Mened. It is he, not his men, whom I must seek out to destroy. Though I had seen him only twice, I was at the royal city. When I was at the royal city, his face was sharply defined in my memory. Once I could get to grips with him, Horus would give me the strength to kill this tyrant who was trying to enslave my people. My heart had steadied to an even thudding, and it no longer hurt me to breathe. I was impressed to see how deeply the warrior code was ingrained in the soldier's character. Two men engaged in a desperate fight were endangering a wounded man whom they had not noticed. I knew they were blind to everything except their immediate enemy, yet when Pata'aru commanded them to ease while the wounded man was moved to safety, they fell apart as though suddenly cast into statues of fury. They stood motionless while Pata'aru and another priest carried the man away. Only when they heard the priest tell them they were free to go on fighting did they fall upon each other once again. There was a brief lull. Both sides, as though by mutual consent, fell back a few paces and began carrying their dead back to their own lines. After they had laid down the corpses, they sluiced water over themselves, some rubbing the palms of their hands with powdered rosin to improve their grip on the dagger hilt. There was no way of telling man from leader, except by personal recognition. All were renelled with a sweat and dust, and most were smeared with blood, either their own or other enemies. All down the line, fighting flared up again. At the entrance to the enclosure of the wounded, I saw a woman standing and knew it was Kias. She would be able to recognize Hanuk, even when he was at the far end of the field, for no one could match his height. He was fighting on my right, a smile on his face and his feet. Two men he had just killed. I saw an enemy bowman aim at him and shouted to him to duck. He did not hear me. The arrow struck his right shoulder, and while he was trying to pull it out, two men attacked him. They must have recognized him as a leader. 5 more men had soldiers dashed forward towards him. I can still fight, he shouted to me as I ran up to join him. Keep your back against mine and watch their eyes. The first man to rush me slipped on a patch of blood. As he did so, my dagger caught him in the belly and ripped it up. He crawled away, a loop of bowel protruding between the fingers of his hand with which he was trying to close the rent. There was a stifled cry from Hanuk. They've got me, Rahab. For a moment his weight was supported against my shoulders, then he slid down at my feet. To the oryx, he shouted, and saw that 2 of my bowmen were already running towards me. I cradled Hanuk's body, trying to protect it. I realized that they meant to take me prisoner. Else, why would they try to grapple instead of using javelin or mace? A man sprang on my back. I was lucky and caught his arm so that I was able to throw him over my head in the wrestling hold which Sebek had taught me. 3 of the 5 remaining men turned to meet the bowmen, who dropped their bows and drew their daggers. I felt Hanuk move. He wasn't dead. If only I can keep these 2 off a little longer, he will be saved for Kias. One of them drew back, and I saw him pick up a mace. I lunged forward to catch the other man around his waist. If I can lift him, I can use him as a shield. The mace descended. I was falling down a black shaft, and could see the water far away at the bottom. What was it Hanuk had said? There are spikes under the water so that death shall be unpleasant. The Sekhmet priests had beaten me at last. I thought I was too clever for them. Surely Hanuk put me back when the stone turned. Then why am I falling? I must have hit my head. They shouldn't have let Kias come on the field. I can hear her voice. My eyelids are so heavy, I can't open them yet. Kias, ought not to be here. Her voice was steady. She can't know about Hanuk yet. I shall have to tell her. She's talking to Hanuk. Does she realize he's dead? Lie quite still, my very dear. The shaft of the arrow is broken, and they've got to cut the head out of your shoulder. Your left arm is broken at the elbow. Pataharu set it before you regain consciousness. Oh, my dear, it's hurting you so terrible. No, no, it's not all bad. Hanuk's voice. With a great effort, I opened my eyes. I was lying on the ground in one of our tents. Kias was kneeling between Hanuk and I. His left arm was in a splint, and Pataaru was cutting an arrowhead from the other shoulder. I saw Hanuk's lip tighten as he tried to keep back a gasp of pain. Blood dripped down in slow, heavy drops. Kia's forehead was beaded with sweat, but her hands were steady as she poured cane spirit on a pad of soft linen and helped Pataaru to bind it over the wound. How was the battle going? I said between his teeth. He said between his teeth. I don't know, but we are sure to be winning, answered Kias. Over 100 of their wounded were brought in before you were hurt, and they have lost twice as many dead. Are you sure Raab is all right? I should be dead if it wasn't for him, Kias. He'll be all right. He's not hurt so badly as you are, though he's still unconscious. I raised myself on my elbow. No, I'm not, but there's not enough wine in Egypt to give me another headache like this one. Though by tomorrow we shall have one nearly as good, though drinking to our victory. I shall have the first drink now and then go back to the battle. Lie down, Raab, said Kias firmly. I'll bring you some wine, though you mustn't have had too much, for you have been hit on the head. You've got a huge lump over your right ear. Pataaru said it was a miracle your skull wasn't staved in. Anyway, you can't go on fighting because you've got a bad wound in your right arm. For the first time I noticed there was a thick pad of folded linen covering my right arm from elbow to shoulder. I flexed my fingers and found they were still moving freely. There doesn't seem to be much wrong with my arm, I said. What's happening to it? You'll know soon enough when Pataaru comes back to put in some stitches. He said he was going to do it as soon as he finished Hanuk. Right, and I'll finish this here and finish the second part at a later time.